You wake up and nothing looks dramatic, but everything looks different. The room is the same, the faces are the same, the conversations even sound the same, yet you hear what is underneath. You hear what people mean when they say they are fine, and you hear what you mean when you say you are fine. The first shock of awakening in relationships is not mystical, it is relational, because you can no longer pretend you do not notice. At first you try to keep it private, like a new sense you did not ask for. You listen more, you react less, you hold your tongue because you think you are becoming wise. But the quiet becomes heavy, because it is not wisdom that is holding you back, it is the fear of changing the ecosystem. You already know that if you start speaking from what you see, the old agreements will start cracking. Some connections are built on shared joy, but many are built on shared avoidance. When you stop avoiding, you stop providing a certain service without realizing it. You stop laughing at what hurts you. You stop nodding at what you do not believe. You stop making yourself smaller so the room can stay comfortable. The unspoken contract breaks and people feel it before they can name it. This is where the myth appears that awakening makes you lonely. It does not make you lonely, it makes you honest. And honesty exposes what was held together by performance. You are not losing everyone. You are losing the version of you that was willing to pay for belonging with self-erasure. That feels like losing people because you confuse the relationship with the role you played inside it. When the role dissolves, the relationship is forced to show its actual structure. Awakening also changes what you call love. You start to recognize that love is not constant closeness, it is constant truth, and truth does not always keep things nearby. You can love someone and still admit you do not feel safe with them. You can care about someone and still see that being around them pulls you away from yourself. That realization is tender and brutal at the same time because it breaks the old equation that love means enduring everything. Then the guilt tries to stabilize you back into the old shape. It says you are becoming arrogant, cold, judgmental, too intense, too serious. It says you should be grateful, that you should not disrupt what has been. But the deeper truth is simpler. You are no longer willing to confuse loyalty with silence. If you go back now, you will not go back to peace, you will go back to self-betrayal. The next phase is not spiritual, it is practical, because relationships do not run on insight, they run on behavior. People do not leave because your consciousness expanded, they leave because your patterns changed. You answer differently, you stop rescuing, you stop over-explaining. You stop being available at the cost of sleep and self-respect. And when you stop doing those things, the people who depended on them experience your growth as abandonment. This is why some connections fall away quickly and some rot slowly. The quick endings happen when the relationship was mostly a transaction, even if it was disguised as closeness. You stop providing the currency and the bond reveals itself as conditional. The slow rot happens when both people want to stay, but neither wants to name what is changing. Avoidance can keep a relationship alive for years while intimacy is starving the whole time. You will be tempted to make it clean by blaming yourself or blaming them. That is another form of avoiding the complexity because the truth is usually mixed. You may have tolerated too much and they may have taken too much. You may have been unclear, and they may have ignored your clarity when it finally arrived. Awakening does not make you innocent. It makes you responsible for seeing the full pattern instead of picking a villain. Communication becomes the blade you cannot hide from. Not the performance of calm words, but the willingness to say what is real without turning it into a war. If you cannot speak your truth, you will call it peace, but your body will call it tension. If you speak your truth with aggression, you will call it honesty, but the other person will call it danger. The middle path is not softness, it is precision. And precision requires you to stop needing the other person to approve of your clarity. Boundaries are where this teaching becomes undeniable. A boundary is not a punishment, it is a line that protects your aliveness. Many people do not fear your boundary because it restricts them. They fear it because it reveals them. When you stop tolerating disrespect, you expose how often it was present. When you stop people-pleasing, you expose how much the relationship relied on you staying confused. So you learn a hard lesson about compatibility that feels almost offensive at first. Some people are compatible with your performance but incompatible with your truth. Some people are compatible with your generosity but incompatible with your needs. Some people are compatible with your silence but incompatible with your voice. Awakening is the process of switching which version of you is allowed to lead, and the social world adjusts with consequences. Then the third layer opens, and it is deeper than perception and deeper than behavior. You begin to notice the nervous system underneath every interaction, the way your body contracts before you even think. You realize you have been calling some people safe when your stomach was always tight around them. You realize you have been calling some people difficult when they were simply triggering the parts of you that still wanted to hide. Awakening in relationships is not only mental clarity, it is somatic truth. Your system has been trained by history, and history does not disappear because you gained insight. If you grew up needing to stay agreeable to stay connected, your body will interpret honesty as threat. If you learned that love requires overgiving, your body will interpret receiving as suspicious. If you learned that conflict leads to loss, your body will interpret disagreement as abandonment. When you awaken, you do not escape these patterns, you meet them in real time. This is why you can know what is healthy and still choose what is familiar. Familiarity feels like safety because it is predictable, even when it is painful. The nervous system prefers predictable pain over unpredictable growth. So you may cut off people too fast to avoid the vulnerability of working through change, or you may stay too long because your body mistakes endurance for devotion. There is also the hidden addiction to intensity that many awakened people do not want to admit. When you are used to chaos, calm can feel like emptiness. When you are used to struggle, peace can feel like boredom. So you may unconsciously recreate relational heat and call it passion, or recreate emotional distance and call it independence. Awakening does not only remove illusions about others, it reveals the ways you use relationships to regulate your inner weather. At the same time, you start to feel a new kind of responsibility that is not about saving anyone. It is the responsibility to stay human while you change. When you see more, you can become impatient with those who see less. When you heal more, you can become contemptuous toward those who heal slower. That is a quiet corruption, because it turns awakening into superiority. And superiority is just avoidance with better posture. Now, in the final stretch, the real synthesis begins without becoming neat. Relationships after awakening are not a category of people you keep and people you lose. They are a mirror of what you are willing to embody. If you awaken only in the mind, you will leave people and call it alignment. But you will carry the same pattern into new faces. If you awaken only in behavior, you will set boundaries, but you will still feel lonely because your heart is not included. If you awaken only in the nervous system, you will feel everything, but you may never speak, and your relationships will become soft prisons. The point is not to stay connected to everyone. The point is to stop shrinking as the price of connection. You can stay open without staying available to harm. You can be kind without being compliant. You can be honest without being cruel. But that requires you to tolerate the discomfort of being misunderstood, because some people will interpret your self-respect as rejection. Some relationships do not survive because they were never built to hold truth. They were built to hold comfort, nostalgia, proximity, convenience, shared habits, shared wounds, or shared enemies. When the wound closes, the bond loses its glue. That does not make the bond fake, it makes it specific to a season. Grief is appropriate here, not resentment, because something real did happen and it is still ending. Other relationships can survive, but only if both people agree to evolve the contract. That means renegotiating how you speak, how you repair, how you handle conflict, how you honor space, how you hold accountability without humiliation. Many people want the closeness without the renegotiation. They want the old version of you with the new peace you carry. But peace is not transferable when it is built on your self-abandonment. So you become careful with the word growth. Growth is not how enlightened your language is. Growth is whether you can remain present when your truth creates tension in the room. Growth is whether you can listen without collapsing, speak without attacking, and leave without hatred when leaving is necessary. Growth is whether you can stay warm while being firm, because warmth without firmness becomes submission, and firmness without warmth becomes armor. There is a particular moment that defines this whole path. It is when you realize that staying open is not the same as staying exposed. Openness is an internal stance. Exposure is a lack of discernment. You can keep your heart open and still say no. You can keep your heart open and still walk away. You can keep your heart open and still let someone feel the consequence of how they treat you. And this is the real aftermath of awakening in relationships. It does not give you a new social circle as a reward. It gives you a new standard for truth, and truth reorganizes your life slowly, painfully, faithfully. You start to recognize connection that does not require you to perform, and you start to lose interest in connection that does. You stop chasing belonging that cost your nervous system, and you start building belonging that can hold your full presence. You will still miss people. You will still wonder if you did the right thing. You will still feel the ache of being the one who changed first. But you will also feel something quieter growing underneath the ache. A kind of integrity that does not need applause. And when you can hold both, the grief and the integrity, you stop confusing loss with failure, because you finally see that some endings are the way your soul keeps its promise to remain awake without becoming closed. You think the main work is learning who to keep, but the real work is learning how to stay when staying is no longer automatic. The old version of you stayed by default, through confusion, through discomfort, through the hope that time would do the speaking. The new version of you cannot do that. Not because you are less loving, but because you can finally feel what silence costs. So the first test is simple and sharp. Can you name what is happening without making the naming a weapon? Most relationships do not break from one argument. They erode from unspoken repairs that never happen. A rupture occurs, someone withdraws, someone over-explains, someone pretends it did not matter. The surface returns to normal, but the nervous system remembers the unresolved moment and starts adapting around it. You call it maturity because no one yelled, but under the calm there is a new rule: do not touch that part again. Then intimacy shrinks, not from malice, but from 1,000 small avoidances that begin to feel like personality. After awakening, you cannot ignore repair because your body no longer agrees to perform stability. You feel the gap after a hard conversation like a pressure in the air, like a misalignment that keeps humming. You notice how quickly people try to skip the middle, to go from discomfort to jokes, from tension to distraction. You also notice your own urge to hurry, because repair requires vulnerability without certainty. It requires you to admit impact, not only intention, and that is where pride usually hides. The truth is that many people have only two settings for conflict: collapse or attack. Collapse looks like silence, freezing, smoothing, saying yes while the inside says no. Attack looks like blame, moral superiority, intensity that pretends to be clarity. Neither creates repair. Both create distance, and distance can masquerade as peace for a long time. Awakening forces you to build a third setting, the one most people never practice: directness without domination. Directness without domination means you do not punish the other person for not reading your mind. It also means you do not punish yourself for having needs. You say what happened, you say what it cost, you say what you want next time, and you do not attach your worth to whether they receive it well. That sounds simple until you realize how many relationships were held together by your ability to tolerate ambiguity. When you stop tolerating it, the relationship has to develop new skills or reveal that it never planned to. Then comes the painful part. Some people do not know how to repair because repair was never modeled as safe. They apologize to end discomfort, not to restore trust. They explain to be forgiven, not to understand impact. They promise change to keep access, not to build capacity. So you begin to watch for a different sign. A quieter sign that cannot be faked for long. Do they stay present when it is uncomfortable? Or do they reach for exit routes the moment accountability appears? This is why awakening creates a strange loneliness even inside a room full of people. You can be surrounded by conversation and still feel alone because no one is willing to touch what matters. You are not craving drama, you are craving contact. You are not craving constant intensity. You are craving the integrity of a relationship that can metabolize truth. That craving becomes a boundary you carry in your tone, and people either lean toward it or back away from it. Now the second pressure begins, and it is not about conflict, it is about identity. You start to notice how many relationships were built around a shared version of you that no longer fits. They loved the you that could absorb disappointment and still show up smiling. When that version starts dissolving, the social system experiences a threat because it was organized around your predictability. This is where people say you have changed, as if change is betrayal. They say you are different, as if different is wrong. They ask what happened to you, as if your growth is a phase that will pass. Underneath their questions is a quieter fear. If you become real, they may have to become real too. Some will try to pull you back with nostalgia, others will pull you back with guilt, and a few will pull you back with anger, because anger is the fastest way to restore the old hierarchy. You also have to face your own attachment to being understood. Being understood used to be the currency that made relationships feel safe. If people understood you, you felt connected, and if they misunderstood you, you felt rejected. Awakening breaks that dependency slowly, because you realize that clarity does not always land, and that does not automatically mean you are wrong. Sometimes a person cannot understand you without losing the story they used to survive, and they will protect that story more fiercely than they will protect the relationship. So you learn to stand inside your own perception without becoming arrogant. You learn to allow misunderstanding without rushing to fix it. You learn to let someone be disappointed in you without collapsing into apology. This is not coldness, it is the end of bargaining for belonging. You are no longer willing to trade your inner coherence for an outer peace that depends on you staying small. At the same time, you have to grieve the old closeness, even when it was built on partial truth. Grief does not always mean you made the wrong choice. It can mean the relationship mattered even if it could not evolve. Some people were a real home for a younger version of you, and you can honor that without trying to resurrect it. If you skip grief, you will turn your losses into contempt, and contempt will harden you into a person who calls isolation sovereignty. You begin to see the difference between solitude and isolation with painful precision. Solitude is chosen and nourishing. It restores your capacity to feel and think. Isolation is protective and starving. It keeps you safe from disappointment, but also keeps you safe from love. Awakening invites solitude because you need time to recalibrate, but it will also tempt isolation when the world feels too slow or too asleep. The challenge is staying open enough to be found by new connection while refusing the old version of connection that required self-betrayal. Now a third pressure rises, deeper than repair and deeper than identity: the question of love itself. Many people think awakening makes love unconditional, but what often happens first is that awakening makes love discerning. You stop calling attachment love. You stop calling tolerance love. You stop calling emotional labor love. You start to ask what love does in real time, not what love claims to be. Love after awakening is not a feeling you offer to keep someone near. It is an orientation toward truth that refuses to degrade either person. That means you can love someone and still set a boundary that disappoints them. You can love someone and still refuse to continue a pattern that harms you both. You can love someone and still admit that proximity to them pulls you into a version of yourself that you have outgrown. This is where many people panic, because they were taught that love is proven through sacrifice, and you are no longer willing to sacrifice your aliveness, so you get tested in subtle ways. Someone will accuse you of being selfish when you stop overgiving. Someone will accuse you of being cold when you stop performing emotional reassurance. Someone will accuse you of being judgmental when you stop normalizing disrespect. If you still need to be seen as good, you will fold under those accusations and call it compassion. If you can tolerate being misunderstood, you will stay steady and discover a harder compassion, the one that does not abandon you to keep the room comfortable. Then comes the most difficult mirror. You can use awakening as armor. You can become so devoted to clarity that you lose softness. You can become so devoted to boundaries that you forget tenderness. You can become so devoted to truth that you forget timing and tone. Some people call that integrity, but the body of everyone around them calls it danger. If you cannot feel your own edge, you will harm people while believing you are healing, and that is a quiet spiritual violence. So you have to refine your presence, not your language. Presence means your truth comes with contact, not performance. It means you can say hard things while still remembering the other person is human. It means you can hold your boundary without contempt, because contempt turns protection into punishment. This is how you stay open without becoming porous, and how you stay discerning without becoming closed. As your discernment grows, you start valuing the kind of relationship that many people have never built. You value conversations that can hold silence without withdrawal. You value conflict that leads to repair instead of scorekeeping. You value affection that does not demand self-erasure. You value accountability that is not humiliation, and honesty that is not cruelty. These values sound basic, yet they become rare because they require two people who both prefer growth over comfort. Now, in the final stretch, the three pressures begin to converge, and you cannot keep them separate anymore. A relationship that cannot repair will eventually force you into an identity compromise, because you will start performing again just to keep things stable. An identity compromise will eventually distort love, because you will call endurance devotion while your body is screaming no. And love without discernment will eventually sabotage repair, because you will tolerate patterns that make honest conversation impossible. This is why awakening reorganizes relationships from the roots, not from the surface. You start to recognize a pattern that you used to miss. When a relationship feels safe only when you stay silent, it is not safe. When love feels available only when you are agreeable, it is not love, it is conditional access. When closeness requires you to abandon your nervous system, it is not intimacy, it is a familiar trance. You do not see these patterns to become ruthless. You see them to stop participating in your own disappearance. The most grounded form of awakening in relationships is not cutting people off quickly. It is learning how to be clear early, how to repair when possible, and how to leave without poisoning your heart when leaving becomes necessary. Leaving with poison keeps the bond alive as a wound. Leaving with clarity ends the bond as a season. That difference decides whether your future relationships will be wiser or just more defended, so you become careful about your exits. You do not need to announce a spiritual evolution to justify your boundary. You do not need to win the narrative. You need to keep your integrity intact. Sometimes the cleanest exit is quiet and consistent. A gradual removal of access, a refusal to keep negotiating reality. Sometimes the bravest exit is direct, a conversation that names the pattern without attacking the person. Either way, the goal is the same. Do not abandon yourself to avoid discomfort. Then something new begins to form, almost slowly enough to miss. You start attracting relationships that can handle you as you are, not as you perform. You start meeting people who do not demand a smaller version of you to feel comfortable. You start finding contact that feels simple because it does not require strategy. This does not happen because you chase it. It happens because your nervous system stops volunteering for old contracts. You still feel grief sometimes, because growth has a cost, and pretending otherwise is another form of avoidance. But the grief stops being proof that you made a mistake and becomes proof that you cared. You can care and still choose distance. You can love and still choose a boundary. You can miss someone and still know that being close to them would require a version of you that you can no longer inhabit. And if you keep going, you discover the quiet conclusion that does not feel final, but feels true. Relationships after awakening are not about collecting the right people. They are about becoming the kind of person who can hold truth, repair, and love in the same body. When you can do that, you do not need to close to stay safe, and you do not need to stay open to prove you are spiritual. You simply become a place where connection is possible without self-betrayal. And whatever cannot.
If this transmission resonated, the spiral continues. You did not arrive here by chance, and you do not leave unchanged. More teachings are unfolding across the Vaharat library, each one meeting you where you are, not where you think you should be. Follow resonance. The next threshold is already listening.